Our panel for tonight includes inspiring women from around the globe. They will be sharing their experience as ex-Muslims, their stories, and the great work they do. I'll be introducing them as they come up the stage. Ibtisam Betty. She's a clinical psychologist specializing in criminology and victimology, particularly violence against women. She's the co-founder of Alternative Movement for Individual Liberties and have organized a number of civil disobedience events in Morocco. Mimsi Vates, or Marwa, she's an ex-Muslim YouTuber who discusses issues that Muslims and non-Muslims face. She's part of the movement to normalize ex-Muslims and put an end to blasphemy and apostasy scrutiny in Muslim communities. She went to a Muslim school in London and has been to a number of religious Muslim events and organizations before she came out 2 years ago. Zara K. Zara K is a Tanzanian ex-Muslim and atheist activist. She's based in Amsterdam. She was booked as a Shia Muslim in Tanzania. She's the founder of Faceless Hijabi, a platform to celebrate ex-Muslim women, to share their stories and get support.
I'm just going to correct that, it's Australia.
Is it? Okay. Sorry, Australia. Sadia. Sadia is the co-spokesperson of CMB. She's a human rights activist with a focus on honor-based violence, forced marriage, and sexual violence. She was featured in the award-winning film Islam's Non-Believers in 2016, and she's the winner of the IKWRO Special Recognition Activist in 2017. This panel will be chaired by Mariam Namazi, who's the founder and co-spokesperson for the Council of Ex-Muslims. And we'll welcome all. Halima Salad is also another member who should have been with us today, but the Home Office didn't grant her visa. Boo! Yeah, but she will join us later via video, so we'll see her later.
Okay. How do we turn this on? Oh. Hi everyone. Is it on? Sorry. Is it on now? I don't think so. Oh yeah, okay. Well, hi everyone. We wanted to have a very informal sort of discussion. Just a few questions about our backgrounds. I mean, we've got some very incredible, interesting women here. I'm really so proud to be sitting amongst them. And it would be nice we thought just to have a chat about some of the things, our backgrounds, when we started doubting, what are some of the problems we faced, what are the greatest things that have happened as a result of our questioning and doubting. And then we will open it up to you in the last 20-25 minutes. So be patient, we'll come back to you. So I want to just start maybe with Marwa. Now, Marwa is Mimsi Vids. She's an amazing YouTuber if you've seen her. I don't usually like to mention one's husband alongside one, but her husband is also amazing, and he's ViduViz, and he does some brilliant videos as well. And what's interesting about Marwa, actually, when I was looking at her work, I realized that she started looking more deeply into Islam because she wanted to persuade her father not to be an ex-Muslim. And her father is another amazing man, Hassan Radwan, who was one of our early members as well. So I found that quite interesting. You know, here she is wanting to challenge her dad, show him how wrong he is, and then she ends up becoming worse than him. So tell us about that, because that's quite an interesting background, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, no. No, that's only for YouTube. Is this working? Yeah? Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. So I was very, very devout as a Muslim. I think I was probably even, stricter than my dad ever was anyway. And that's because I was raised in a Muslim school, as you said, and the people I was around were a lot more kind of Salafi based, which is just kind of hardcore, you know, music is haram, everything's haram basically, nothing was allowed. So I was kind of very much influenced by that, and I felt like that was the real Islam. And even when my dad was Muslim, I kind of felt like he wasn't a great Muslim. So it was almost like I never, this is so bad, I feel like I'm bashing him, but I never like took his kind of opinion, like, you know, I didn't hold it in the highest esteem anyway, because I went to this business school and my chefs were telling me this is Islam. So I was always giving my dad like dawah and like trying to tell him like, actually, this is how it's supposed to be. And then when he kind of sat me down and was like, so I don't believe in Islam anymore, but you can do what you like, that's kind of what he said to me. I was kind of like, okay, so he's having a mental breakdown. This is what this must be, because this is ridiculous. It's like telling someone the truth isn't the truth. It's like there was no way of that not being, like there was no way that Islam wasn't true in my mind. So I was like, okay, you live your life and I'll just pray for you, and also I will be stronger in my Islam and be a stronger Muslim, not just for him but also for myself. I wanted to and a part of it also was I like genuinely loved people, and I felt like I actually don't want everyone to go to hell. Like it would be nice if we all went to heaven, right? So I kind of wanted to kind of spread the word and then just bring everyone along with me. So I had that in my mind of just, I'll be a stronger Muslim. So I really kind of delved deep, and when I was at university I would make leaflets. So I was like one of those pushy religious people. So I would like, and I would kind of swoop it into any conversation, like, oh, well, Islam says, whatever. Like, even if we're talking about like health, I would be like, well, the Prophet Muhammad. So it was, and as I said, it came from a place of I cared about people, and I didn't want to think about the bad things. I didn't want to think like, oh, by the way, everyone's going to be tortured if they don't. So I was like, okay, let's just stop thinking about that and focus on the good, and then eventually it was kind of like I was battling with myself over many years of trying to cope with the concept of, well, women are just meant to be subservient to men, and that's the way God made us, and trying to kind of accept things like that. Obviously, in our day and age, it becomes, a little difficult, and even with science and with all the things that kind of kept coming up. And I think the reason I was fighting with these as well is because I was trying to convert people that were giving me other arguments, and then I would be like, okay, give me 1 second, I'm just going to come right back, and I'm just going to do loads of research, and then we'll discuss this again. So I kept kind of running away, doing all the research, and then being like, oh crap, I don't have any answer for you. Like, I don't know what to tell you. Yeah.
And it's interesting because you were saying that you actually had people do an intervention recently when you went home, and they were trying to bring the sheikh and exercise her or whatever they did to you. So maybe talk about being on the receiving end of that as well, and what happened there.
Well, yeah, so I absolutely am on the receiving end of that, like, all the time now. It's like a constant thing with my family. Some family have just cut me off. Others are kind of like, just telling me about the horrible things about hellfire, and my grandmother actually, I'll come to that in a second, my grandmother just died recently, and all my family felt like this is a reason to tell me, like, you're going to die soon and you're going to go to hell, and it was like the most horrible situation to be in, because I'm like, I seriously don't want to hear this right now. And it's like, literally, you're kind of, experiencing this, and it's like, they find a reason to scare you, and it's like this fear factor of like, do you see that? That's going to be you, that's going to be you. Okay, do you really want to go through that? And like, and then you're going to be tortured in the grave. And it's like, this is not the time or place. But yeah, I did have an intervention recently where I kind of, went to meet my family, and a bunch of them basically had planned for a chef to come and have a conversation with me, and basically solve all my problems and bring me back to Islam, I think was the plan. You know, he kind of just explained, will try to have a debate with me and explain why it's okay for men to hit women because it's only with a feather, and it's, you know, it's just a light thing. It, you know, all these, you know, and we were going at it for a good like 2 to 3 hours, it was exhausting, and we were going around in circles. But the conclusion was I had magic on me, and I needed to be exercised, you know, as you were saying, and you know, he was trying to kind of tell me that I needed to take kind of Quranic herbs and things like that, and yeah, it's just, you can't argue against them almost, because it's like they're just in this like delusional world. It's like, even when you're trying to argue logic, then it's like, oh well, it's magic.
And we'll come back, and also start feeling free to jump in as well, but I thought I'll ask each of you something, and then well, I guess Betsy, her story is very different, isn't it? Because you come from a quite free-thinking family, but you're all the threats and pressures from the external society. She's very active in Morocco, of course, at the forefront of really radical direct action work, you know, on the ISIS death list, I mean, you name it. She's had a lot of pressure everywhere. Tell us a bit about that background, growing up in a family that was accepting, but a larger society that wasn't.
Okay, so sorry for my English. I have a bad English, but I will try to speak in English and to explain something. Yeah, so I was born in Morocco, I grew up in Morocco, and now I live in Morocco and France. So yeah, my family is secular family. My father actually died in 2008, but he was activist and he was agnostic. My mother is Muslim, but very secular, so no problem with religion things. And we didn't, my sister and I, we didn't have a religious education. Yeah, and my father didn't want us to have a religious education, because in Morocco, as you know, Islam is a religion of the states, so public school, so you have a religion education, etc. So my father chose to put us in a international French school, because it's secular. But with the society and the big family, like uncle, aunts, etc., it was difficult. But it was in the 80s, so it was pretty okay. But in the 90s, and since like, I don't know, 20 years now, we have a lot of problems because of Islamism. So because of my activism, it's okay with my mom, because as I told my father died, it's okay with my mom, and she supports me a lot, and she supports my activism, my atheism, etc. But with neighbors or family in general, or society, and because of my activism on social media and a lot of that, there is a lot of pressure. So it's very complicated, because as you say, it's okay. So a lot of people told me like, okay, but your mom is cool, and it's cool with your family, but there is a society. So as a woman, it's very complicated, because I don't have like borders, like, and I organize a lot of campaigns and demonstrations and actions with civil disobedience, and I'm like the first woman I say in Morocco, in the media, etc., that I'm atheist. So that's complicated, because family is one thing, and I know that it's very hard when your family is Muslim or against your belief, etc. But it's not easy, because I do live in Morocco, and I feel like alone, because there is a lot of atheist people in Morocco, or agnostic or whatever, but it's social hypocrisy. It's like national sport in Morocco. So, like, there is a lot of human rights organizations or feminist organizations, but they told people like me, and they tell me that I have to hide my atheism and some thoughts, etc. For example, in Morocco, because I'm feminist as well, when we fight for women's rights, I am like universalist and secular feminist. But other feminists in Morocco, they use cultural relativism and religion to fight for women's rights. So it's very complicated. So I'm very isolated with the other activists, because I co-founded a movement, and it's a secular movement, universal and secular. So we cannot fight, and we are never like invited to debate or I don't know, in the conferences, in television or whatever. So, but as you say that I have a lot of threats, like rape threats and death threats, but I really do not care. So because I'm not afraid. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm still fighting against fundamentalists and against Islamism and some ideologies like obscurantism, etc. So what I have to say to finish what I'm saying is, I hope that a lot of people like ex-Muslims could show her faces and tell to people that, yeah, we do exist and we do have right to exist. But I can understand as well that it's very complicated because you have lot of you can have lots of problem and consequences in Morocco as well, because lots of people tell me that like Morocco is very open country and it's like moderate Islam, but moderate Islam, what it is, it doesn't exist. I know Islam and the laws and the Sharia. So, but I hope that we can have a lot of people like us to be with us and to stand with us.
Thank you. So I think you raised yes.
I'm sorry for my English. It's very complicated.
You know, Betsy raises some really important points. One is about how it was even better in a way in the 80s, and again, we're seeing the effects of the rise of Islamism and the religious right in all of our societies, and also the issue of hypocrisy, you know, that people are okay if you do it privately, but the minute you want to do it publicly, it's considered you know, another form of extremism. I think we hear that quite often, and we'll come back to that. But let me come to you, Zara, because Zara is a Tanzanian, and she has started something called Faithless Hijabi. And what's interesting is all your sisters are still hijabi, aren't they? All her sisters are still hijabi. And so tell us a bit about that journey of yours. Because you left, you went independent very early on.
Yes. So I was born, does this work? Okay, cool. I was born in Tanzania. I left Tanzania when I was 16. I went overseas for university, went to Malaysia, and then I moved to Australia. And I'd been in Australia for about over 7 years, and I just relocated to London for a short while. I thought London was very exciting with ex-Muslims and Muslims. I think I can learn a lot from this badass women sitting right next to me. I'm so proud. Yeah, so I grew up in a very tight-knit community in the Shia sect. We were called the Koja Shia Ithnashari Jamaat. And basically, in Tanzania, everybody knew my dad. My last name is so unique that if you Google it, it's basically my family and very few second or third cousins. But a lot of people knew my dad, and I had started questioning religion when I was 14. I stopped praying, I kind of fasted. There were times, especially living overseas, I was like, nobody's parenting me, I don't really need to fast. I still had my dad call me every day, he's like, did you pray? And I'm like, no. Yeah, so when I started questioning at 14, I stopped praying. I hated it. It just didn't make sense for me to pray to a God who's given me this life, apparently, but he's so selfish that I need to keep praying to him. And when I lived overseas, it was the first time at 16 that I encountered a woman who called herself a Muslim and didn't wear a headscarf. I started wearing a hijab when I was 8. I'd never seen somebody who called himself a Muslim and wore a headscarf. And that was so surprising, and it made me realize that I've been in a bubble for 16 years and nobody told me this exists. And slowly I started resenting that I was wearing a headscarf, so I started loosening it up. And at the age of 18 and a half, I took it off. It would still be around my neck, but I felt so naked. And when I moved to Australia around 19 years old, that's when I publicly, posted a photo of me not wearing a hijab. And I told my family, and my dad said, that is equivalent of you being naked. And I know that never came from a malicious intent, but he was conditioned to believe that Muslim women need to be respected and they're diamonds, and I was treated like an object, as though I was only my father's property or my husband's property. I just felt like an object, and there was no Zara. Who is Zara? It didn't exist. I was just someone's daughter or to be somebody's wife. And that's what drove me to finish both degrees, my master's at 21. And I started working, and I got a job at Google in a very big tech company. I was so proud, and I called my dad. I'm like, hey, I got a job at Google. And he's like, so you're going to start wearing a headscarf now because you have a good job? That was, at that point is when I realized that I had become, from suddenly the golden child, because my family had never been to university. I have older siblings that had never done degrees. And suddenly, from being a golden child, I went to being a black sheep. And that I had no value, or I was never the best daughter because I don't wear a headscarf. And it was in the early months of 2017 when I lost my niece. She was 4. And that was devastating for all of us. But as a family, we got together, closer and tighter as a unit. And mid-2017, I posted up my first public post about supporting people who are Muslims and gay, and that they have a right to live and they don't deserve to be they don't deserve to be criticized and they don't deserve to be ostracized. At that point when I posted it up, I was really scared. I didn't know how that post would go, and to my surprise, in 2 days I got 500 comments. Most of it was hateful. My dad, who hadn't spoken to me for months, called me and asked me to take it down. I said, no, this is principle. Whether or not you believe that gay people are right or wrong, I am not letting anybody talk ill about them, and I will fight against this. And that's when my dad hung up on me and said, we're done. I'm like, okay, cool, we're done. But while I was reading through the comments, people just started throwing verses of the Quran on how they need to be thrown off they need to be burned, or the story of Lut, the city of Lut. And that all happened, and people were so aggressive. So I went online and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to prove you wrong, that Islam is tolerant, and I'm going to show it to you. I went online and I looked up for verses that talked about disbelievers, that talked about people who don't agree with you. I'm like, surely there's one that says we're all peaceful and we're amazing and we should be accepting. I started crying when I saw the results. And that's when I knew that this is it. Even though I hadn't prayed, this is it. There is no going back, that this is the time when I've given up on Islam. And once I gave up on Islam, God didn't exist. The only reason I thought God existed was because I was conditioned to believe it. And I learned more about Islam after leaving it than I had ever learned when I was in it, because nobody had ever told me that it was spread by the sword. Nobody had ever told me about the violent verses. I didn't even know 434 was a thing. 434 is, by the way, the wife-beating verse. And I didn't know that existed. I was in the illusion that, Islam is perfect, it's peaceful, I am so blessed to be born as a Muslim, and I'm going to go to heaven even though I commit sins. But I could never be in a religion that was so hateful towards people's orientation, towards people's faith, and even towards women. And being a woman in tech, I'm in a man's world, and then being a woman in Islam, I was already so subjugated. So I think when I publicly came out in September 2018, I had decided that I'm going to open an organization that that is aimed at supporting women who come out, because there's a woman in tech. Thank you. So, Faithless Hijabi, what it does right now, and I can go into depth later, but what it does is it creates a safe space for women to share stories anonymously, because we're the most oppressed, we're the minority of the minority, and we're not being heard. Every time we put up a dialogue, we're shut down through sexual harassment. And I'm sure all of us can agree that it hasn't been an easy journey, and it's even worse when you're a woman. So Faithless Hijabi started as a little Facebook group because I wanted to help other women, and I wanted them to share their stories, and every time I read it, while the girls came from different backgrounds, there was an overlapping story. There was abuse, there was subjugation, there was forced hijab, there was assault right after leaving. It was violent. Like, we were treated lower than second-class citizens, especially for leaving our faith, and that we had no rights. And Faithless Hijabi now is growing and getting bigger. It's a global movement. People come and they share their stories. I've had curious Muslim share their stories as well. It's that phase in between that they've started questioning. But the biggest achievement was 2 days ago when I was being blamed for the Christchurch event, and I think we'll talk about it later, when people called me a murderer and people called me an Islamophobe and a racist. I'm a brown woman. I don't know how I'm racist, but people called me names, and all of us had, we got messages. Are you happy now? Is this what you wanted? But I posted it up online because some people thought they had the right to write a private message to me and ask me to commit suicide because I'm a hateful person. So I posted it up online, and a few people from Tanzania came out to me, and I was so proud that they had never known that, in Tanzania, they'd never known anybody from the community ever come out public. And a lot of people, since Christchurch, came out to me, but that also opened me up to more criticism.
Those are such important points, and we will come back to that, because those are accusations I think all ex-Muslims face. And there's a huge distinction between the right to blasphemy and white nationalism or, white supremacy. But coming back, I think also Zara's case is really, it shows the importance of financial independence. I think that's something we all always see, where people are financially independent, the opportunities are a lot there. But she also mentioned something about family, and I think we all have it to some extent. You've had this as well, where, this battle of wanting your family's love even though they are abusive.
And we see that quite a lot. We actually see that quite often. Our ex-Muslims, wow, that was really loud. Our ex-Muslims, they love their families, their parents so much, and they're not getting that same love back. And I find that deeply, it's really sad, because...
Tell us about yourself. That's the hard part, isn't it?
That's the hard part. So, this is really confusing. Sometimes it gets really loud, sometimes it gets really quiet. No, it's cool. Is that working? Yeah, okay. I've been questioning for years, I guess, as a kid. I used to ask my parents just random questions, I have mummy and daddy, so that's how I came to be. And when I get married, I'll have babies. Because I thought that's just how it worked, And there was never any answers for me when I asked them about God's mummy and daddy and God's children. I used to get told that there was something wrong with me, that I had the devil inside me, that I was possessed. But ultimately, actually, when I left religion for the first time, when I left Islam for the first time, I was 15 years old. And to be quite honest, I was just bored by it, praying 5 times a day, reading the same book over and over and over again. I have this library in my house, right? Of so many books. I'm guilty of having far more books than I've actually read. I hope to read all of them at some point, but I'm making up for lost time. But before, it was just about reading the same book over and over and again. And I actually feel a little bit aggrieved by that, because I could have read so much, so many other books in the time that I spent reading the same literature again and again. So at 15, when I told my mum that I wanted to leave Islam for the first time, I didn't phrase it like that. I just said, I don't believe in God. And she turned to me and she said, don't tell anyone else, because we kind of got to kill you if that happens. So I was like, okay. So I then just lived quietly for many years. And then when I was 19, I was in an arranged engagement. And because of that engagement, I knew I had to become religious, which I did. So it was just on the crux of my 19th birthday, so I never know if it was 18 or 19. But on my 19th, for about 6 months this engagement lasted, I got engaged and I researched lots about the duty of a wife, a mother, and various capacities as a woman in Islam. And I kind of didn't like what I was reading. And actually it wasn't just the Quran that I read. I read lots and lots and lots of books about the same parts of the Quran, because obviously that's the charge that often gets thrown in our face, you know, that you're illiterate, you haven't found the right interpretation yet. With whatever way I looked at it, it was just domestic abuse. And actually as a 19-year-old kid, because that's all you are at 19, even though we think we're like really, really old at that age, as a 19-year-old kid, my first thought actually wasn't, why does he get to beat me? Was, why don't I get to beat him back? Because I did want to, I wanted it to be fair. He gets to kick the shit out of me, I get to kick the shit out of him, you know. It's a two-way thing. I kind of questioned that quite a lot, and I got told various interpretations, you know, you can beat them with a feather, you can beat them with a toothbrush, you can beat them with a fucking handkerchief, you can, or the best one I ever heard was, you can just humiliate them. It's about humiliating them back into submission. And there were a few key words in that, right? So my professional background before CEMB was domestic abuse and sexual violence. So it's nothing other than domestic abuse if you are humiliating somebody. If you have given one person a higher status than the other in a relationship, that is an abusive relationship, and that has no place in 2019 in modern day life. You know, we have come to learn now that that's not right. I would like to say that this country hasn't, you know, learned from its mistakes. We used to give guidances around what hours we could beat our wives within in this country. It was only in 1991 that rape within a marriage became a criminal offence in this country. But we kind of tiptoe around these issues when it comes to Islam in Britain, and that's what I find particularly offensive. But something I said earlier, I just want to touch on again. Quite often, as ex-Muslims, and I think it's an important label in some ways, but actually it's not the most important label for me. I call myself an anti-theist, I don't like religion, and an atheist. But the ex-Muslim title is important for our activism and for what it means. But we need a broader term for all of us, and I think that's why Atheist Day has been so crucial. But often we're asked about, well, why did you leave? You know, were you abused, or we're expected to give some philosophical answer. Nobody ever asks an ex-Christian for the same philosophical answers. Nah, didn't fancy it. That's good enough. Well, why is that not good enough for me? Why do I have to give some fucking philosophical answer? Although I do get that post-leaving religion, a lot of people do a lot of research. Sometimes before leaving religion, they do a lot of research. But why can't we just get to a place where, it was crap?
I suppose we've talked about when you started doubting. Your time of doubt was when you had that arranged marriage? Was that when?
No, so I started really young. I started really young.
The second time?
The second time, it was because I went into it because I knew, before even starting doing any of my reading, that if I wasn't devout enough, that relationship would have turned abusive. I mean, I had a bit of a history. I'd run away from home, had a boyfriend that was white, and that was, you know, quite controversial. So I had to do a little bit of reshaping of my personality, because otherwise that would have led to quite a lot of abuse. But the second time was, I've forgotten the question.
Like the doubt, it was when you started reading to prepare for your wedding, your marriage.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't want to be raped. I didn't want to be, you know, beaten. And the fact that he was given that, gifted that right by God, that was quite concerning.
And what about you, Betsy? When was the time when you felt doubt the first time?
I think always, but yeah, I was very young, but because my first blasphemy, I was like 5 or 6 years old, because we say Allahu Akbar in English. It's like
God is great.
God is great, and they say Allahu Asghar, how to translate?
God is small. Or,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and after that, I think I was like 13 or 14 years old, because I didn't want to go to family religious thing like Eid and everything. So I refused. But the most important, that when I was, so I think I've never been Muslim actually, but I didn't care. But when I was, but Islam is there because it's my family, it's society, it's Morocco, blah blah blah. But when I was 20, I was in Paris to study, and I had a cancer, and because it's a very important thing, it's a hard thing, so I don't know why, but you have the religion thing, the religious things in the face, and so it was my first really doubt. So I've never been in a mosque. I lived in Morocco, but because I didn't care. But in Paris, when I had my first chemo, I said, okay, so I'm gonna see. I don't know. It was very weird actually. Like I asked, like, for the first time, I wanted to know if God or Allah exists. So I went to the mosque after my first chemo. So it was the first time. And after that, so I knew, not at the moment after my chemos, after my, like 6 months after, I knew that it's like, it was like a break, a definite break with Islam or with religion, and so that was very, it was a very, yeah, it was the last thing when I had a doubt, and after that, like, I knew that I'm atheist, or ex-Muslim, if you prefer.
What about regrets? Because, I mean, it is a very difficult thing. There's a lot of pressure. And I know that there are ex-Muslims amongst us who become Muslims again, like your dad, for example. Or, you know, there is this constant pressure to go back. We have, for example, a wonderful ex-Muslim woman who was sent to Sudan by her family. She was going to be forcibly married. We managed to bring her back here. And all of this happened to her because she was an atheist. And she just told us that she's become a Muslim because she just needs her family and she can't be without them. And I think that's very key, this need for appreciation and the love of your family, but also that there is all this pressure that kind of pulls you back.
But this is why we say that the love of our families and our communities is conditional. And that's the really, really sad thing, that you have to give up your true self, to use that cliche sort of term, to get that love, and that's something that should be unconditional from your parents. You know, parents choose to have you, so they should act like parents. And often we see, you know, abusive generation after abusive generation, and often that ends up becoming an excuse from our communities. You know, my mum and dad did it to me, and I was an abused child. Well, so fucking what? It's time to get over it for the sake of your kids, because of course, I feel sorry for them until a point, but then the fact that they're then choosing to abuse their future generations, that is an active choice that they're making. You decide whether your past becomes your future, and with our communities, they're choosing that. They're choosing to continue to allow that control and coercive and controlling behaviour to continue from their families and their communities. And they could just say, you know, actually, I'm going to put my kids first for a change.
I suppose, I mean, this is a question that we kind of know the answer, but you wonder, you know, with all the pressures, do you have any regrets, Marwa? Any at all?
I mean, I don't regret leaving Islam or being in this position, but it's still a difficult decision. And you know, you mentioned my dad kind of maybe coming back in a way because he wanted the title of Muslim, and I think that is because the way that we were as a family and as a community was we were extremely community and people orientated, and I think that's why I was able to even be so religious without my dad in a way. And you know, we kind of did everything as a community. It's not just a religion, it's not just a belief system, it's your like life, it's the people around you, it's every day, it's just a constant thing, it's your culture. It becomes, you know, it's just one thing, your family, and as you said, it's conditional and it's expected. There's no like, well, what do you believe? It's we are Muslim. You know, this is who we are. It's not what we believe. So what was the original question? Sorry.
Oh, yeah, so any regrets?
Oh, so I don't regret it, but that's been the most painful thing for me. So, you know, and with my dad, my whole family were like, you can't speak to him anymore. And it's definitely a kind of like, you have to cut off ties. You know, I had a few family just not talk to me at all. A few were like, come over to my house. And then they said, actually, we can't host you in our house, let's meet in a coffee shop. And then they were like, yeah, we've just done this to tell you we can't see you anymore and we can't speak to you anymore. So for someone that is literally, you know, these people were my life. You know, I wasn't the kind of person, and neither was my dad, that we were very kind of individualistic person with people. We were very, you know, people depended on us and we depended on people. That's just kind of our lifestyle, that's who we were. So, you know, we did everything together and we were involved in events constantly. So just to give you an idea of that kind of mind frame, so to suddenly feel isolated, it's devastating, and you suddenly feel like everyone loved you and then now everyone hates you, and that's the hardest thing. I don't regret it because you have to be true to yourself, and it's like a sacrifice, I suppose, to just be honest, and I'd rather be honest, so I don't regret it, but it's painful.
Any regrets, Sarah?
No regrets. No regrets. I think this is exactly where I need to be. I am glad that I got the upbringing that I did. My family was relatively liberal in that I was allowed to study overseas at the age of 16, and I was allowed to live my own life. I remember
because they trusted you.
They trusted me. I was exactly. I mean, at a very
Little did they know.
Oh yeah. So when I was, you know, when I was deciding to go overseas, my uncle told my dad, but the Western values, you know, they're very different from our values, and it's always almost the case. Even living, I'm from a developing country, but even in the West we have. Even in the West, we have Muslims who have segregated the Islamic value, the Muslim value, from the Western value, which just means that they refuse to accept a progressive or a liberal value, like a liberal lifestyle, as though they're two separate things. But I am glad I got the upbringing that I did, because it's only made me the person that I am, assertive. I like challenging things, and my friends who had known me from university at the age of 18, and now that I'm an ex-Muslim, and they're not Muslims, but they're like, we knew this was coming. You were never really Muslimish because you were always progressive, you talked to everyone. So I'm really glad that happened.
Any regrets, Betsy?
No, I do not have regrets. So that's It works? Ah, okay. It does work. I don't know if you know that I organized in 2009. It was our first action, a picnic during Ramadan. So that's why I'm like famous, because of this picnic in 2009. And so I think I'm the most hated woman in Morocco, but I'm proud. I'm actually proud. I have to say that we organized this picnic because in Morocco we have an article in the Moroccan Penal Code. It's the Article 222, and it says that, I don't know if I have it. Any person known to be Muslim, but known, we don't know what known means. But any person known to be Muslim breaking the Ramadan fast publicly, so it's punishable by up to 6 months in prison. So we did this demonstration or this action to condemn this article and to fight for individual liberty and individual freedom of religion and freedom of conscience. So since 2009, and we are in 2019, and as the fact is, I am a woman, so in all religion, and Islam in particular, as you said, when you are a woman, so you are not permitted to speak or to have like some rights and some... We cannot exist, I think. So because I organized a lot of things for women's rights and for sexual and reproductive rights, I organized like a kissing in 2013 because two teenagers, was in jail because of a case on Facebook. Organized a big action for abortion rights. I organized a lot of actions and a campaign for sexual liberty, for LGBT rights, and so I have lots of threads and lots of messages and lots of things on social media. Lots of people hate me, and lots of people try to how to say no, my mom to pressure. Yeah. And so I think, yeah, sorry mom, it's very difficult, but no, I do not have regrets at all. I think we have to fight for our rights, for women's rights, for ex-Muslim people and atheist people in general, and no, I cannot stop my fights.
I'm going to ask Sadia this question as well, and then we'll open it up to you. Any regrets, Sadia? Well, the first time I met Sadia, actually, was at a CMB event, and all she did was cry. Don't look at her now. I mean, my gosh, she's like a powerhouse, but all she could do was cry, and I didn't even know why she was crying, because it was a very loud room, and all we were doing was hugging each other, but I had no idea what had
Nothing's changed. We still cry all the time.
So, any regrets?
What do you think? No.
It's a rhetorical question.
No, but I just want to say, before I say anything else actually, like, Betty, you are one badass fucking woman.
And we love you.
You do. Oh my god. Like, oh my god.
Oh my gosh.
Actually, what everything else that we go through, the threats, the shit, it's actually quite minuscule in comparison to the level of shit that you deal with. And for us, the online threats, you know, like dickheads that text us and stuff like that, I'm like, oh, find us first, wanker. But with Betty, like that kind of shit, there's only, like, people only have to whisper in each other's ears, she lives down there, or this, like, the threat to you. I mean, like, every time I've heard you speak, my heart, just hearing you talk, I'm like, boom, 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 boom. So, like, I haven't got a hat on, or maybe I could, no, like hats off to you, right? And actually, and this woman too, she's amazing. Like, I know I'm supposed to be talking about myself, but
any regrets?
she doesn't like being complimented. So no, in short, like, and I've been through quite a lot of shit actually. Like, it's been hard with my family. I've been homeless twice, without any support. So financial independence. Like, if you're kind of on the edge and you're kind of considering leaving family, leaving your community, financial security is key. That's the thing to think about. But yeah, other than that, no. It's been hard at times. I'm not going to say that it's been easy. But I've never thought I wish I'd stayed in that community, and I wish I'd, lived with those same restrictions, because they were suffocating.
Okay. Well, you've heard from all of these brilliant women, and now we want to open it up to you. We've been speaking for about 50 minutes, so we have another 20 minutes to get questions and comments from the audience. While we're getting mics around for people to, if anybody has a question, they can raise their hand, and we'll pass the mic around. Jimmy, do you mind taking mics? In the meanwhile, Samint, come here, my darling. So Samint is the brilliant artist whose artwork is outside. And I think it would be nice just to hear a few words from her. I think maybe particularly about some of the issues that were raised here, the influence of Islamism, any comments you want to give before we open it up.
Hello everyone. Actually, I'm French as well, so English is not is my second language, and I did prepare a speech. I can read it, or just okay. You want me to say?
Maybe just comment on some of the things you've heard and your opinion on things.
I think it's very important to be here and to say that ex-Muslims, women, which is two words very difficult to say for a lot of people. Ex-Muslim is very difficult, but ex-Muslim women, can you imagine? So it's very important and very inspiring for the future. Since today it's very hard to undergo the social and religious pressure. It's really harder and harder today. What I can say that is very hopeful and interesting to see, even if they have very different stories, they share the same experience of the patriarchal violences. So patriarchy do exist. This system which oppresses every woman and also every child do exist. So their different testimonies show that they don't know each other before this event, and they say exactly the same thing, you know. So their experience is very interesting because we didn't really prepare what we are supposed to say in this conference, because we wanted to be spontaneous. Since I don't since I don't speak well English, I just prepare a speech because it wasn't really scary to speak today for me. Yeah, I finished. Thank you very much.
Actually, there's a statement by Samint on your tables as well, so you can read about her work as well. Go ahead, Halima. Comment or question or whatever you want to say.
Comment and then a question as well. I actually met Mariam 10 years ago. It's been 10 years now, and I remember back then there were only few women in the group and any kind of events, and this is amazing that 10 years later we have Asian ex-Muslim women's panel. So fantastic, it's really great. So I have a question about mothers. So obviously with all of you, I wanted to know how your mums reacted to your coming out story. Obviously in our society, our mothers are sometimes maintaining the patriarchy within the family, and within the community as well, they seem to be the ones facing most of the oppression and hatred, more so than our fathers, at least in my experience. So I just wondered how your mothers reacted and what relationship you have with them, if any, I hope. Thank you.
I think just feel free to respond.
I just recently put up a video, I hate the camera, but I just recently put up a video on family and boundaries. So, surprisingly, my family and I actually have a working relationship. It's not the best, we've had safe distances, but especially with my mum. I'm not sure if she's in an illusion that this is a phase, but we communicate. She feels for me, she loves me a lot. She tries sending me this Islamic forwards, like, you'll come back, one day you will. And I had to stop there, and I'm like, if you send me one more forward, I'm going to block you, because this is not nice for me. Just the same way I'm not going to send bacon to your house, right? So we had to maintain safe distances, and I put a roadmap up on how people can come out. But just maintaining distances is actually improving our relationship. And, just me talking about my mental health, which I'm very open about, it's helping us connect even more, and she respects me more now that I've had more resistance to all the hate and all the emotional blackmail from my family and my cousins and everybody else. I think my family respects me more now than they ever have before.
With me, my mum is kind of, along with the rest of my family, as I said, they're kind of like moving like a flock of people. So they have like had meetings about this, about me. And you're right about the whole women thing. It's basically like all the women cousins and my aunties and my mum have like come together to like figure out what's wrong with me. And with me, my mum in particular is kind of more like, oh, there's something wrong. Like it's like she's just sad, It's more kind of like, there's something wrong with you, and we'll fix you. Like she's kind of like hopeful that I'll be fixed one day. But again, I kind of would rather that than her kind of wanting to kill me. Obviously, some people have it way worse. So, but obviously, ideally, I'd rather just accept me for who I am. But you can't have it all.
The bar's really low, isn't it? I'm really glad they don't want to kill me. I'm just glad they accept me because they don't want to kill me.
Yeah. At least they're talking to me. I mean, that's the reality, isn't it?
Yeah, as I said, I really want to take my mom, and I don't want to cry, but because it's very, very hard. I'm sorry that I cannot explain and express myself in English, because when I organized the picnic in 2009, so I was a woman like other women, but because of this picnic, I was like very famous, but in the bad side. So in all the world, all newspapers, etc. But since 2009, it was because I never stop, and I do a lot of things, and it's very, very hard. For my man, she lives in Morocco. I live in Morocco and France, so I'm very often in Morocco as well. So it's she's Muslim, but she's secular. She met my dad, and my dad was activist, was agnostic, was in jail because of his activism. He died in 2008, and I co-founded my movement in 2009. So it's like, okay, so your dad is not there anymore, and you are doing the same thing. So, but she's cool, but it's very difficult because lots of people and society and family as like, so what's wrong with your daughter, and you have to tell her to stop these things, etc. So I want to thank her tonight because she's very passionate, yeah. And she's still supporting me, and and she's very, very liberal and very cool, because I'm like every day when I saw her, I'm like blaspheming, and so she's cool with that, and I'm like, okay, you have to tell these people that Islam is like misogynistic, yeah, religion, and we don't have equality. We live in gender apartheid. And I want to give one example, because I forgot. Like when I was very young, I was like, okay, I never knew that when you have the baptism, yeah, that you have ships. Yeah, no, what's the name of? Comment dit mouton? Yeah, ships. Okay. So yeah, when you have baptism for children, yeah, you have 2 ships when it's a boy and 1 ship when it's a girl. Sheep. Oh, sheeps. And no, but ships. Sheep. 1 sheep. 2 sheep. Yeah. So that's why. Yeah, not 2 sheep. So I forgot to tell this story, because I was like, what? I never knew. No, never. But so that's why I'm trying to explain to my mom, because I don't want to face these people. So I gave her a lot of example, and I asked her to tell these people, and she does. So thanks to my mom, and it's cool. With her, the relationship, it's very cool.
Also, sorry, I think you mentioned it as well, just that there's this with mums, and I've heard this other women say this as well, where they almost ignore the fact sometimes. They kind of go into this like delusional thing where they'll just be like, oh, did you pray? Or like my mum would be like, okay, we'll just make a little dua, and I'm like, no, I don't do that anymore, remember? So it's like, yeah, that happens a lot, I've heard as well.
Yeah, it's like whenever I travel, because my parents live in the States, you know how when you're traveling you have to walk under the Quran, and my dad keeps putting the Quran under me, and I'm like, Dad, just get this thing off my head. But the plane will most probably crash if I have to walk under the Quran. But it is this thing where they constantly just pretend, everything's fine. But I think Halima raised a really important point, which is the shunning of the family, this deep love and need to be loved by your family. And it's so painful. I can see expressions when we even talk about it, how heartbreaking it can be for so many people. And I just want to tell you one thing that when I was in Holland at an event, I met this wonderful Turkish woman. Her name is Nazmiye Oral. And she has a hijabi mother. She herself is an atheist. And she's done a film with her hijabi mother. She actually goes on tour. They perform together. And they relive all the stuff that the mother's told her and all the things that she's told the mom. And what she says is, I demand to be loved the way that I am. I refuse to let you shun me. And I don't know, when I heard this, I was hysterical crying. And I had to give my speech after she spoke. I was like, I have to speak after her. I can't speak anymore. I don't know, it just really hits an emotional chord, And this is one of the things that people just keep going back to abusive relations. They're trying, they pretend they're still, no matter what, they're still trying to fit into a box to have that love. And that is, I think, one of the most difficult things. Anyway, another question or comment?
I have a question from somebody who wants to remain anonymous and doesn't want their voice on the recording. The question's directed towards Zara. So in the UK, often we see that there's maybe like well-known human rights organizations and the media won't take up the voice of ex-Muslims, and they won't take up the dialogue of apostasy because of the need to stay politically correct. And the question was whether that's the same in Australia or whether it's different.
Absolutely, it's very much the same, and even more so because we don't have a lot of ex-Muslim people talking out. We don't have a big organisation like CMB that are public. We have an underground Australian ex-Muslim group, but most of the people there are undercover. But yes, there is very much so the regressive left and the right who prey on the vulnerable. And no, they don't give us an opportunity. I was in the media earlier this year after Rahaf's case, like talking about faithless hijabi. And, you know, I just submitted a paper like 3 months ago about why apostasy laws won't stop the rise of ex-Muslim women. And it talked about honor killing, it talked about apostasy laws in 13 countries and why women face the harshest treatment in Islam, and even when we come out. And since Christchurch, they're like, I don't think we're going to publish it. So, you know, it's just given us a lot of backlash. And yeah, in Australia, it's very much the same. The left won't let us talk. Like I said, I've been called racist. After Christchurch, all of us got the regressive left, even the rights were kind of scrutinizing us. And it's, yeah, very much the same in Australia, or even worse, because we don't have big organizations vouching for our free speech.
That's the annoying thing, is we get it from every side.
The Muslim left, the
everywhere.
Muslim right,
And every country.
the left, the right. We just have our own island, and I think that's what makes our small voices even louder and powerful. And that shouldn't stop any of us. No attack should stop us from free speech, especially against all hate and discrimination.
But it was the same with these events.
We have another 6 minutes. Any other? Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Mimsy, you mentioned that you were visited by a sheikh, and he told you that you were being infested or infected by magic. Presumably not the Harry Potter kind. We know that some families seek out exorcisms to treat people who are struggling with their mental illness. I volunteer with a mental health charity called Time to Change. One of my objectives is to defeat the stigma around talking about mental health in all contexts, not just ours. I want to know your advice on how to help vulnerable people seek real treatment instead of seeking out exorcisms, whether that's through their choice or through their family's choices.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't hear the end of that, but I mean, what we're all doing, I think, is part of that, because at the end of the day, you know, this concept of religion, where does that come from? It comes from, well, in this particular instance with that sheikh, you know, he's talking from the Quran, you know, this is an illness that the Prophet spoke about. And so these are issues that we all are kind of discussing as ex-Muslims and basically telling everyone that this is all nonsense. But you're absolutely right, this is something that really needs to be discussed so much more, because mental illness and then blaming it on an exorcism is so dangerous. And then, you know, so many people are prevented from taking medication, and it's just, I mean, I don't know if you guys have any points on that, but it's...
There's an organisation called the National FGM Centre, and they've broadened their horizons just from FGM recently to breast ironing, but also religious-based harmful traditional practices. So it is being picked up. It's still very, very quiet, but it is being picked up. So there is help and support out there, because now religious-based abuse is being considered a harmful traditional practice. So it's worth noting that.
Should we get 3 more questions, and then we'll do a final roundup of answers, just so we can get as many people in as possible. And then you go ahead. Yeah.
Hi. So I have 2 questions, and so I recently wrote an article about ex-Muslims in my university blog, and the most common reaction I got was, "What about Islamophobia?" So it was almost as if the ex-Muslim issue was being treated as like a collateral damage. So like, yeah, they get killed and get abused by their families, but you know, we have to protect our Muslims first. So how do you change the kind of perception? And second question is I'm wondering if you have had any success talking to Muslims, because I have a lot of Muslim friends, and actually one of my best friends in uni used to be Muslim, and he was very progressive Muslim, but he was still very defensive and sensitive about the criticism of Islam. And when I tried to talk to him about the issues in Islam, like the wife beating, it went kind of really bad, and now he thinks that I'm brainwashed by Jews or something. So how do you? So if you have any tips?
Can I just say? Can we just let's get, because there's only 4 minutes. Let's get a few questions and then we'll all round up.
How can you claim to be Muslim when you were never ex-Muslim, when you were never Muslim anyway?
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think a suggestion for a way forward, and I think being old enough to be everybody's dad out there, I can say that I'll take on Mariam in that being the biggest badass here of all, in that Mariam, you belong to me. Before you jump on me saying it's misogynistic and patriarchal, you belong to me because every fiber in my body, as a surgeon I only know biology, you lot are much cleverer, every fiber, every cell in my body resonates with every cell and every fiber in your body. Now, these are very brave young women out there, but still the pain and poignance is coming out of losing their families. Ladies, please be aware that all of us are your family, and you are our family. We need to reach out to each other to fill that horrific, painful void that all of us feel having ditched Islam. A very quick second point to me about a speaker who said about mothers. Now, to my transition leaving Islam was very easy compared to yours. It's either before, life is 2 periods, before you read Russell and after you read Russell. Thankfully for me it happened at between 13 and 14 because there was no TV, etc. Now, Russell wrote that the biggest prejudices are created at your mother's knees. You read Russell and you read a bit of Quran and realize what a load of nonsense that is, and you convert. I mean, it's impossible not to. Now, some of you are going to be mothers, and the reason I'm here to support you is that you will be far more effective. I don't have those organs, but you do, and you will be far more effective in actually bringing up your children than dads like me could ever be. So thank you, and you, as a family, as a dad to all of you, have my total support.
Thank you for making us all cry. Yeah, because, it has to happen, doesn't it? Guys, we really have no more time. Yeah, go on, my darling. Last one. Yeah.
Action-oriented question. The word Islamophobia has been manufactured by the British Royal Military for a long time back, and it has been categorically and systematically disseminated into the media and everywhere else. And every time something happens, this word comes back as a resistance to any criticism of Islam or its ill effects on the society anywhere in the world. So what can we do to counter that? Can we do something similar to counter that?
Okay, thank you very much. So let's finish now. If you can each just comment. No, Betsy can't talk. No. Okay. Let's just take turns and just answer any question or make any final comments.
Okay, I'll just say very quickly, the term Islamophobia just needs to be scratched. If you hear this term, it's just a ridiculous term that doesn't make any sense. It's basically putting together, attacking Muslim people and an ideology, which doesn't make sense. What we're criticizing is an idea, is an ideology, and there should be no reason why we can't do that. It's done in every other circumstance. And there's this special treatment that infuriates me about, and they kind of make it as if it's racist or we're attacking a people. It's like, no, that's not not the case. That's not what we're doing. So scratch this term. I don't even like hearing it. You know, we're talking about the idea. I just wanted to say that.
So we've heard this term Islamophobia for such a long time, but all it does is shut conversations up that can challenge Islam. And I will always challenge an ideology that doesn't give women their rights, that subjugates them, that wants to kill me and people like me. But I will not stand for anti-Muslim bigotry. I will stand against that. And I always make a distinction when I talk about Islam that does not equal to Muslims. I will continue to scrutinize that ideology.
So, in terms of this defensiveness that you've come up against from your friends when you talk about ideas within Islam, actually we find that quite early on with a lot of ex-Muslims as well. It's very, very uncomfortable. That defensiveness has been drilled into us from a very, very young age. So even after leaving Islam, some of that defensiveness remains. That's quite normal. That's part of a process. So we tend not to be, well, I tend not to try and get too in people's faces because they're on their own little journey. But healthy conversation's useful. And you know, you can't blame them for that defensiveness. I do want to touch on the first question you asked, actually, because I get fed up of talking about and safeguarding the fuckers that want me dead. And the fuckers that want us dead, right? So, ex-Muslim women get a lot of shit, right? And those that are popularizing this definition of Islamophobia tend to be quite radical Islamist-type individuals. So why should I have to worry about safeguarding them? By talking about my issues, there is no suggestion that by proxy I want them dead, or I want some harm to come to them. That is often thrown at us intentionally to prevent us from talking about it. And the only other situation where I saw a likeness of that was the grooming gangs, right? So for years, the young girls that were being systematically raped and rounded up by these fucking paedophiles, we didn't talk about the perpetrators because we were too scared about the backlash on the perpetrators. Well, I am sick of talking about the safety of the perpetrators. Fuck the perpetrators.
I want to thank all of you and thank these wonderful, brilliant women here. One final sentence from each of them. What is the best thing that has happened to you since you've left Islam? Betsy. The best thing. What?
But I like it.
Betsy.
Yeah, that's why I don't know. The best thing. The best thing, like I am free. I'm a free woman. It's the best thing, I think. Yeah. I'm really free.
I mean, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, I mean, that's it. You're free to believe what you want, to do what you want. You don't have to double check a kind of old book if it's okay. I mean, other than that, that's the main thing.
Yeah. I actually have a tattoo that says free, and that's exactly it. I think it's free.
This, right?
Yeah. So, thank you, and thank you for your kind words, for your support. We need to support each other.